Karl Marx, maybe one of the most infamous, if not influential, economists uh, of of the world, and so not necessarily in a good way, and not necessarily in a bad way. So there's two signature works that we're going to focus of Karl Marx. One is the Communist Manifesto, and the other second is Das Kapital. And so we'll first focus on Das Kapital. In this, he criticized the industrialization of the economy. He argued that what this does is it led men, women, and children to lower standards of living. It would set up those who own the factory as the capitalist and to profit and benefit them, but not the actual workers. And he argued that capitalism led to exploitation, inequality, servitude, and eventually revolution. And the reason he made this argument was because of this theory of David Ricardo, the labor theory of value. That this invariant measure of theory said that it's the workers that create value, because its value is determined based on how the resources required to produce something. And so he created what he called this exploitation rate. And he said it's the surplus value divided by the value of final product. Is the surplus value is how much it costs to produce it minus how much it costs to sell. And so as a result, he showed that this is this exploitation. And that's what he argued against, is this exploitation of workers is what's going to lead to revolution. And so it leads to a very interesting question. Who should be entitled to the profits of a company? Is it the owner, the capitalist, or the employees, the workers? And this can be a very challenging question. Many might say it's the owner, the capitalist. They're the ones who invested in it. They're the ones who take the biggest risk. But they're oftentimes not the ones actually making the product. It's the employees. And so that's where we have these challenges to think about, is how do we address these two, this question? And Karl Marx would definitely argue it should be the workers. He also argued for this evolution of economic systems, that capitalism was not bad in itself, but it was just a natural step in the evolution towards communism. And in his Communist Manifesto, he makes 10 points. And some of them here is, first, he wants to abolish all property, all rent. So you can't rent land, you can't own land. It's owned by the people collectively, and it's used by the people collectively. There's no inheritance. There's no bank. We don't need banks because there's no money. Factories and instruments and productions are owned by the state, are owned by the workers. There's an equal obligation for all to work. All have to work. And there's free education. And there's no child labor. The purpose of the child is to get educated. One of the famous sayings is, from each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs. And that's what he argued, is you're going to be distributed according to your needs. And the role of the government was to expand these resources, to discourage increasing demands and wants of the citizens. Right? You don't need 5 or 6 cars. Some people own 5 or 6 cars. You don't need that. So let's give you according to your needs. You might need 2 cars. Capitalism suggests that we can distribute resources using the price. Marx argues the government can do it better. Marx also argued that money fundamentally changes people. He argued that the role of money is to facilitate trade. And the reason why you gain money is so you can facilitate trade. But what he argues is, through capitalism, is money becomes the end goal. Rather than get money to facilitate trade, people try to just hoard and gain money. And so do we see the influence of Marx today? And the answer is absolutely. He would argue that the income inequality is evidence of the exploitation of the worker. And we see when we talk about the growth of wealth, the 1% is growing so much faster than the bottom 80%. Just to put things in perspective, Jeff Bezos' net worth is $113.5 billion. So if he were to invest his net worth at a 5% return, he would make $15 million each and every day on interest alone. Over your lifetime, you might make $3 million in earnings. There's just a large difference between those capitalists and the workers. And one of the supports of this is a book written recently in 2013 by Thomas Piketty called The Capital in the 21st Century. And what he argued is the reason why we see this divergence is because the rate of return on capital, on those that own machines, those that own factories, those that own companies, that rate of return is so much greater than economic growth. So those people who have access to own, to become owners, to become capitalists, will get richer faster than those people who work throughout their life. And that's one of the criticisms that Karl Marx had of capitalism. And he argued that communism was the solution to this. That is, the collective whole owns the means of production.